Say hello to the Nokia XR20. Quite a bland, unassuming name, but don't be fooled because the Nokia XR20 is one tough motherfucker. Imagine if Jason Momoa and Vin Diesel were somehow able to procreate. Well, the Nokia XR20 would be the smartphone equivalent of that impossible child. And when the Nokia XR20 hits the UK, it'll cost you 399 quid SIM free. So that means it's going to be competing with the likes of the Pixel 4a, the OnePlus Nord 2 and that Poco F3. Undoubtedly some very strong smartphones as far as the specs go, but put them side by side with the Nokia XR20 and frankly they look like utter pussies. And also the phone's manufacturers, HMD Global, will apparently plant 50 new trees for every Nokia XR20 that is sold. Do you see Google nurturing some plant life every time someone buys a Pixel, or maybe OnePlus growing a bit of shrubbery action every time someone bags one of their phones? I don't bloody think so. Anyway, it's time for me to shut my mouth and whip out my XR20 and see what it's capable of. And for more on the latest greatest tech, please do subscribe and ding that notifications bell. Cheers! So first up, let's see what you've actually got bundled in the box along with the Nokia XR20. And as you can see there is a pas de chargeur. Unfortunately, that is because Nokia is on that environmental drive. So you will have to provide your own. And that means that all you get in this little box is a bit of USB cable action. Et voila. And then you do also get several manuals, all for basically every language under the sun. So those 50 trees should just about cover that off. And that's it for the actual box. There's no case or cover or anything bundled in there as well, but that is because the XR20 is tougher than a week-old gammon. And I'll tell you what, this Nokia blower is quite the chunky monkey as well, as you can see there, and it's got quite the heft to it as well. At 248 grams, one of the heaviest smartphones I've handled of all time, I think, never mind in 2021. This is the Ultra Blue model. It's certainly a very dark blue, that's for sure, but you can also pick up the XR20 in a granity color, which is basically a dark gray. Over on the right side, you appear to have an edge-mounted fingerprint sensor as well as the volume rocker as well. While on the other edge, you've got the inevitable dedicated Google Assistant button. And there's also a mysterious red button up top, which I'll definitely be investigating later. And that is also where you'll find the SIM tray. And down below, you've got your Type-C USB port, you've got a headphone jack, hip hip hooray. You've also got space for a lanyard as well, although you don't get one bundled with the Nokia XR20. You'll have to spunk up a bit more cash for that. And it's good to see there's no Nokia branding on a big fat lip down below as well, which is definitely a convention I'd be happy to die in the dirt. You only get a nice subtle bit of Nokia branding here on this edge. And of course around back, naturally. Right, so exactly how proper hard is the Nokia XR20? Well, this beefcake sports a 3D nano-textured rear end. And meanwhile, up front, you've got a drop-resistant Gorilla Glass Victus display, which hopefully will prove scratch-resistant too. The phone has passed military standard 810H testing, so it can survive falls of almost 2 meters, as well as extreme temperatures and humidity and all that guff. While the IP68 water resistance means you can basically just chuck it in a swimming pool just for a bit of a laugh. Alright, so I've come outside to do a drop test with the Nokia XR20 because it seems kind of silly to do an unboxing of one of the toughest smartphones in 2021 without at least doing that. And in case you're wondering, yes, this is actually the very last shot that I'm shooting for this unboxing video, just in case it goes wrong and this thing ends up in basically a pile of glass and ash. Okay, so here we go, action stance. And yeah, it survived absolutely fine. A couple of little scuffs around the corners, just on this front edge bit. Nothing too bad at all. Might as well give it a couple more just to be sure. Yep, still fully functioning. Never had any doubts. Let's crack open that SIM tray as well, see what we're working with. And what you have here is space for 2 SIM cards, otherwise that second SIM slot can be used to slap in a micro SD memory card to expand the storage. Alright then, hopefully got some gas in the tank. Yes, we do. So let's get the Nokia XR20 all powered up and take you on a proper full-on tour. Oh yes, I was hoping it would do that. Alright, so Nokia XR20 is all set up and ready to rock. What you got on here is the latest, freshest Android 11 in a lovely, pleasingly stock Android form as well. Very little tinkering by HMD Global. One of the only additions by HMD is a bit of face unlock support to back up that edge-mounted fingerprint sensor. Seems reasonably sort of quick and responsive. Boom. And so far, touch wood, no real issues with that edge-mounted fingerprint sensor either. Nice and nippy. I do love that noise as well, a bit addicted to that. Very satisfying. And not only is the Nokia XR20 commendable because of that stock Android vibe, but also HMD Global is offering 3 full years of OS updates and 4 years of security updates with this bad boy, which is pretty much unheard of. That's even better than OnePlus's offer for the OnePlus Nord 2. Here in Byeeee and in select other regions as well, you'll also get an extended warranty for the Nokia XR20, 3 years instead of just the standard 2. And if you happen to bust that display within the first year of purchasing the XR20, well, HMD will replace it for free. Between all that and the tree thing, I'm starting to really like them. And of course, HMD has added in that dedicated Google Assistant button, so quick prod of that at any point and up it pops. And as usual, that is pretty pointless because you've got not only a dedicated assistant icon that you can tap at any point to bring up the Google Assistant, you've also got the Google search bar, which again, you can just tap this and it brings up the Google search. You can also drag from one of the bottom corners to call up the voice assistant as well, although this seems to be slightly clunky here on the Nokia XR20. Takes several goes before you actually manage to get it to bloody work. There you go. As for that mystery red button up top, well, apparently this is a customizable emergency button, so give that a quick tap. And unlike the Google Assistant key, as you can see there, this is fully customizable. And there's actually quite a lot of features you can assign to either a short or a long press. As you can see there, lots of stuff to choose between, including the ability to launch a specific application. And I guess it's called the emergency key because you can have it set to dial your emergency contacts if you want to as well, which of course you can set up again via this app. So if, for instance, you give this phone to an elderly relative or someone who might need assistance at some point, you can just set that up so it's got your details in or someone else who's close by. And then if they do have a bit of a tumble or something, and just tap that button and then they've got help coming on its way. Let's check out some of the specs in a bit more closer detail. So first of all, the storage, you get a choice of either 64 or 128 gigs. As you can see, this is the maxed out model, and of course expandable via micro SD as well, up to a further 512 gigs. And yeah, all the other features that you would hope for and expect at this £400 mid-range price point, all present and correct, including a good bit of NFC support for your contactless payments. Now moving on to the Nokia XR20's mammoth 6.67-inch IPS display, which seems even bigger thanks to those big fat mamma jamma bezels surrounding it in all directions. You've also got a minor selfie orifice cut out just in the central position there. It intrudes slightly on your videos or your games or whatever when you do go full screen, but not to a hideous amount. It's a full HD plus resolution, so images are still reasonably crisp despite the fact it's quite a gargantuan panel. Color reproduction is fine, not particularly vibrant, but not faded or saturated or anything either. You've got very minor controls in the display settings. Sadly, no HDR support here for streaming content in the likes of Netflix. But the viewing angles are absolutely fine, and the brightness levels on those top settings won't exactly dazzle you, but hopefully should be fine for a good bit of outdoor use. As you can see, if you dive into the settings menus, not particularly sharp contrast at all. Those blacks actually look more like a sort of a faded grey. And you'll also spy that there's no way of changing the refresh rate. That's because it's stuck at 60 Hz. There's no 90 Hz or 120 Hz option here on the Nokia XR20, which is something that a lot of rivals do offer, even ones with OLED panels. So if you're after very slick visuals at this sort of price point, I would point you in the direction of something like the Pixel 4a, the OnePlus Nord 2 instead. And the Nokia XR20 does also boast a stereo speaker setup, so let's bump up the volume, see what we got.
M3 Pro is certainly nothing special design-wise, although I do like the smart and simple aesthetics around the back, at least the obligatory branded.
So yeah, not too bad at all. Slightly tinny once you get into those sort of top volumes, and it's not exactly going to burst your eardrums or anything like that, but we should be absolutely fine just for kicking back with some baldy twat on YouTube. A bit of video action on the sly, and of course you do have that headphone jack action if you want to get plugged in, and you've got Bluetooth 5.1 support if you want to go wireless. Now running the show here on the Nokia XR20 is the Qualcomm Snapdragon 480 chipset. Now that is typically found on budget smartphones about half the price or even cheaper than that. Compared with the Nokia XR20, and I have found on most of those phones that the performance is kind of limited, but not terrible by any means. It can certainly do all the stuff you'd want to do in your everyday existence, you know, a bit of social medias, web browsing, all that stuff. Absolutely no problem. I just had the occasional little grievance, like sometimes it would take a while to load up the camera app, especially if you had a few other apps running at the same time. But touch wood, because you've got that pleasingly stock version of Android, hopefully things will run nice and smooth here on the Nokia XR20. The Geekbench scores are perfectly respectable, although again at this sort of price point you can find much better performance from the likes of the OnePlus Nord 2 for instance, which score closer to 800 single core and 2400 multi-core. And just for comparison purposes, some of the other smartphones that use this 480 chipset are the likes of the Motorola Moto G50, the Oppo A74 5G, so definitely considerably cheaper. Let's say around sort of half the price of this one. Still definitely no real complaints so far, and I am definitely expecting to be able to do a bit of light gaming at the very least on this bad boy as well. So let's just boot up a bit of Call of Duty, see how this goes. And yeah, the good news is the Call of Duty Mobile played absolutely fine on the higher detail settings as well, nice and smooth. A couple of tiny little judders here and there, but certainly nothing game breaking. Still perfectly competitive, or at least it would have been if I didn't suck donkey at basically all games. And the Snapdragon 480 chipset does have a built-in 5G modem as well, so like most smartphones these days, to be fair, you do have full 5G support here on the Nokia XR20. As for the battery tech, it's a 4630 milliamp cell crammed into the Nokia XR20's pretty chunky chassis, to be fair. And that should happily give you all-day play, no worries whatsoever. This battery meter is barely ticked down at all, despite the fact that I've been streaming video on Netflix and Disney, plus I've been playing a good bit of Call of Duty. That's definitely because the Snapdragon 480 chipset is nice and energy efficient. You've also got, of course, that stock version of Android, no heavy launcher sat on top, sapping the battery there. Well, you do finally manage to drain the XR20. Well, it's 18 watts fast charge and not particularly fast at all at this sort of price point. Like the OnePlus Nord 2 will power up a lot quicker, shall we say. But where the Nokia XR20 does make up for that is the fact that it's got support for 15 watt Qi wireless charging, which means that you can actually just stick it on a wireless charging pad, don't have to stick in the old Type-C USB cable, and it will power back up again. And that's a feature that's very rare to find at this sort of price point. Now let's finish with a squint at the Nokia XR20's rear camera tech. What you got here is a 48 megapixel primary sensor. It is once again a Zeiss branded setup, of course, backed up by a 13 megapixel ultra-wide angle lens. And you've even got a dual flash setup around the back there as well, so sorted for your nighttime shots, and I'm assuming that you can use that as a torch as well. Oh, yep, you sure can. Fuck me. Okay, that was super dumb. You could also change how crazy strong that torch beam is, and there's even an SOS feature which will have it flashing in good old Morse code. Amazing. But anyway, back to the camera tech, which was what I was talking about originally. And as I say, it's a 48 megapixel primary sensor. Actually shoots in 12 megapixel by default using quad pixel binning. And just as a quick simple idea of how good those Nokia XR20 optics are, here's a few test sample shots that I took around the homestead, and it seems to be sort of natural-ish color reproduction, some nice fine detail as well. You don't want to be pushing the Nokia XR20 with too testing conditions, such as really strong, sharp contrast, but apart from that, it should be absolutely fine for your everyday pics. You can also quickly and easily swap to that 13 megapixel ultra wide angle shooter with a tap like so. As you can see, not exactly the fastest swapping between them. Again, that's a bit of 480 action there for you. And there's also a 2x zoom mode, but it's just digital zoom, of course. As you can see there, you do get little suggestions popping up courtesy of the camera AI, which just tells you to swap to a different mode. So for instance, a good bit of portrait action if you're shooting a living subject. Not that Veronica is living, sadly. And this gives you a whole bunch of filters and the usual stuff that you can play around with as well. All kinds of different background bokeh style action. Zeiss smooth, Zeiss swirl, got a bit of heart and star action. You've also got a dedicated night mode for those low light shots. This will just take lots of different snaps at different apertures and then meld them together for hopefully attractive results. And if you jump on into the more section, that's where you'll find the likes of the Pro manual controls as well, if you want to play around with the likes of the ISO levels, the shutter speed. You can use this mode to shoot in RAW if you want to edit on the fly. Unfortunately, there's no support, certainly not at launch, for 4K video capture here on the Nokia XR20. Again, that's probably a limitation of the Snapdragon 480 chipset. But what you can do is shoot full HD video with a good bit of surround sound Orzo audio support as well. And it's good to see that Nokia's once again brought back the cinema mode. So this just allows you to shoot 21:9 aspect ratio footage. So you've got that nice cinema screen style effect. You've got lots of filters you can play around with to change up the look and feel of the shots. With noise reduction, lots of different features that you can play around with. There is an H-log format option if you want to get a bit of HDR support as well, and video stabilization. And of course, not forgetting that 8 megapixel front facing selfie camera as well. So let's swap to that, and you should be absolutely fine for your sort of basic bog standard selfies. It actually looks like the skin tones are reasonably accurate. Decent contrast and everything just from a quick squint at that. And you do have support for the old portrait mode and everything as well if you want to just blur out the background. Make it all about that face. So that right there in a nutshell is the Nokia XR20, and as you can see, limited in a couple of regions. The performance definitely isn't as strong as a lot of rivals, and that display tech sadly sits in the shadows of the likes of the OnePlus Nord 2, the Google Pixel 4a, Poco F3, etc. But if you're after a stock Android smartphone that boasts incredible durability, then the Nokia XR20 is definitely well worth a squint, because this is one tough nut. And it should suit most everyday users down to the ground. Despite the fact the performance isn't as good as many rivals, you should still be able to do everything you need to with only the occasional little stumble and judder here and there. Battery life should be spot on, and it's great to see features like that cheap wireless charging on there as well, which you generally do not get at this sort of price point. So that's what I think of the Nokia XR20. What do you guys reckon? It'd be great to hear your thoughts down in the comments below. Please do poke, subscribe and ding that notifications bell for more on the latest and greatest tech, and have yourselves a fantastic rest of the week. Cheers everyone, love you!